What's up, AP World crew? Ready to dive back into the industrial age? Today we're tackling Unit 5. Topic 9. The massive social shakeups that came with all those factories and steam engines. Forget just the machines for a second. Let's talk about the people, because trust me, life was never the same again. Before the Industrial Revolution, most people were farmers. Their lives revolved around the sun and the seasons. You lived in a small village, you knew everyone, and your social status was pretty much set from birth. But then boom, factories popped up, hungry for workers. This kicked off one of the biggest migrations in human history, not across oceans but from the countryside to the city. These new industrial cities were intense. They grew so fast there was no planning. We're talking overcrowded, unsanitary living conditions. Families crammed into tiny apartments called tenements, often sharing a single room. There was no running water, no proper sewage system. Diseases like cholera and typhoid spread like wildfire. It was a tough, gritty reality, a stark contrast to the idealized image of rural life. This new urban world also created brand new social classes. At the very top, you had the industrial capitalists, the factory owners, the bankers, the entrepreneurs. These guys became the new aristocracy, replacing the old landowning nobles. Think of them as the Gilded Age billionaires, building massive fortunes and living in luxury. Then, you had the growing middle class. This wasn't just one group, it was layered. You had the upper middle class like doctors, lawyers, and factory managers. Then, the lower middle class, which included clerks, teachers, and small shop owners. What united them? A focus on education, a belief in hard work, what we often call bourgeois values, and a desire to separate themselves from the working class below them. They lived in the new suburbs, trying to escape the grime of the inner city. And at the bottom of this new pyramid was the largest group of all, the industrial working class, or the proletariat. These were the men, women, and even children who powered the factories. Their lives were defined by long hours, low wages, and dangerous conditions. A typical workday could be 12 to 16 hours long, 6 days a week. There were no safety regulations, so accidents were common and often fatal. If you got sick or injured, you were fired. Simple as that. The rhythm of life was no longer the sun, it was the factory whistle. This brings us to a huge shift in family structure. In pre-industrial society, the family was an economic unit. Everyone worked together on the farm. Now, work and home were separate. Men went off to the factory while a new cult of domesticity emerged in the middle class. This was the idea that a woman's proper place was in the home, creating a safe, peaceful haven for her husband and children, away from the harsh world of industry. This ideology defined respectable womanhood, but it was a luxury most working-class families couldn't afford. For the working class, everyone had to contribute to survive. Women and children were a huge part of the factory workforce. In fact, factory owners often preferred to hire them, because they could pay them even less than they paid men. Children with their small hands were especially useful for tasks like fixing threads in textile machines. This had a devastating impact on family life, health, and education for an entire generation. But people didn't just accept these conditions. The harsh realities of industrial life sparked resistance. Workers began to organize. They formed labor unions to demand better wages, shorter hours, and safer workplaces. Their main weapon was the strike, refusing to work until their demands were met. These movements were often met with brutal opposition from factory owners and governments, who saw them as a threat to economic progress and social order. At the same time, new ideas were swirling around, trying to make sense of this new society. Thinkers like Karl Marx looked at the massive gap between the wealthy factory owners, the bourgeoisie, and the poor workers, the proletariat. He saw a system built on exploitation. Marx predicted that the proletariat would eventually rise up, overthrow the capitalist system, and create a classless communist society where the means of production were owned by everyone. His ideas laid out in the Communist Manifesto would become incredibly influential around the world. But not everyone was a revolutionary. Some reformers worked within the system. They pushed for government intervention, leading to laws that regulated child labor, limited working hours, and improved sanitation. Religious groups and middle-class women were often at the forefront of these social reform movements, creating settlement houses and advocating for the poor. And let's not forget the environmental impact. The iconic image of the Industrial Revolution is a sky filled with black smoke from factory smokestacks. This was the beginning of modern industrial pollution. Rivers were contaminated with industrial waste, and the air in cities was thick with soot. People's health suffered from the pollution, and the long-term consequences for the planet were just beginning. So, to wrap it all up for AP World, what are the key takeaways for topic 5.9? First, the Industrial Revolution created a new social hierarchy. The industrial capitalists at the top, a diverse middle class, and a massive working class, the proletariat. Second, It fundamentally changed the family structure, separating work from home and creating new gender roles, especially with the middle-class cult of domesticity. Third, the harsh conditions of urban life and factory work led to new social problems, like poverty and disease, but also sparked resistance in the form of labor unions and new political ideas like communism. The world was remade in this era. The way people lived, worked, and thought about their place in society was completely transformed. These changes weren't just temporary. They laid the foundation for the modern world we live in today. All the debates we have about class, inequality, labor rights, and environmental protection have their roots right here, in the smoke and steel of the industrial age. Make sure you understand these social shifts because they're a huge part of the AP exam. Thanks for watching, and hit that like button and subscribe for more AP World reviews. We'll see you in the next video.